Good morning, folks. So I haven't. My plan today is to record the sort of lecture. So I don't have any slides. I haven't sort of created any for that. The main thing is just to do some of the programming stuff. So I mentioned yesterday in the in-person section about some stuff related to next week. So that's definitely something that I want to talk about now as well. We're not going to have any in-person stuff at all next week. Tuesday, obviously, classes were canceled by the provost, and so because of that, I decided that we won't do it on Thursday either. It sort of screws over folks on Thursday because normally you wouldn't be coming in or whatever on one of the days of the week. So I just decided that we wouldn't do any of the in-person stuff. There will still be lab next week, so that's something that you'll still want to be there for. We need to get ready for the second sort of quiz slash exam, so that's something that we will be doing next Friday during lab. We won't be taking the exam; we'll be preparing for it, so it'll be a little review session. And then because of the classes being canceled on Tuesday, I'm only planning on doing one recorded lecture for next week as well. So you won't have two to think about. There will just be one. So no in-person stuff at all next week. One recorded lecture, but there will be labs. So I'll make sure to put that in my email, that my normal sort of weekly update Monday email, as a reminder of that as well. I'll likely still be on campus. I'll probably not on Tuesday. On Thursday, I'll likely still be on campus in the morning, even though we won't have in-person stuff. But I'll probably just do some grading or something like that. Okay, so today I wanted to do some mouse things. Specifically, things like clicking, things like dragging, stuff like that. It's not particularly complicated code, but you sort of have to know the JavaFX sort of lingo, jargon stuff to understand sort of how to use some of these functions. We'll notice a couple of issues. I'm going to show where you might sort of notice an error when you're trying to do, specifically when we do some of the dragging stuff. Essentially, we'll build up to a decent sort of application. On Thursday, I sort of showed what we're going to do. I didn't have that ready on Tuesday, so some folks have already sort of seen how this is going to look, but it'll be very simple. We're just going to have a couple of shapes. We'll be able to click on them. We'll be able to drag stuff around and things like that. So hopefully this is useful for what some of you are planning for your final project. We'll probably do something with like some images in the near future as well. They work very similar to the shapes. There's just a few sort of differences to it. So nothing particularly complicated, but something that hopefully will help you out if you need to use mouse stuff or image stuff in the future for your final project. So I have a JavaFX application already set up. It's currently empty. So definitely sort of get to that point. This is using a JavaFX or a Java 11, so I have all the appropriate VM arguments and stuff all in there. But depending on what version you're using, just make sure you get it set up so we can create a window. That's the first thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to start with just a pane that I'm going to call. I'll just call it root. Of course, you can call it whatever you want to, and this is going to be a new pane. And of course, that needs to be imported. And then let's just, I'm gonna leave a little bit of space because we're gonna put some more stuff in there, but let's create a scene. I'm just gonna call it S, and this is a new scene. And I'm gonna add the pane, and I'm gonna make this, let's say like 400 by 400 or something. A relatively small window, but it's big enough for us to mess around with stuff. My stage that gets sent in here into start is called primary stage, so that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to set the scene with S, the scene I created, and then primary stage dot show. I need to import scene, of course, as well. And then I should have my blank window. And there we go. All right, so let's create a couple of objects that we can sort of do some clicking stuff with. So I'm going to sort of break up this sort of start method into a couple of different pieces. So I'll have the sort of Windows setup stuff, and then below all of this is where I'm going to put my interaction. So this will be like the mouse interaction stuff. So I'm going to create two objects in the Windows setup. We'll start with a circle, and I'm just going to call it C. And this will be a new circle. And for the circle, you can set the position and the radius right in the constructor. So let's say we want this circle in the middle. So I'm going to do 200, 200, and let's say the radius should be 30. We can pick whatever sizes and positions you want. It doesn't really matter for us. For us here, for one, the rectangle that we create in a moment, we're going to be dragging that around. The circle will have it just sort of sitting in one place. That's why I'm putting it in the center. I'm going to create that rectangle as well. So I'm just going to call this R, and this will be a new rectangle. And for the rectangle, if you put in 4 arguments into the constructor, that will be the position, and then the height and the width. Now, one thing that I want to point out here is that the position of the rectangle is the upper left corner. That's actually going to be important here in a moment when we start dragging stuff around. So that's something that is sort of worth realizing. And then I'm going to draw some pictures of that when we get to that point. And then make sure to import rectangle from JavaFX. All right, so last piece here, and actually I'm going to change the color of these, but we need to add them to our pane in order to get them to show up. So I'm going to say root.getChildren.add. I'm going to do add all and just put in the circle and the rectangle, just as you could do this in 2 calls to add, but if you do add all, you can put them all in at the same time. And then if I run, I should get a black circle and a black rectangle, or in our case, a black square because it's the same height and width. So that's where these things are going to be. Let's change the color of these as well. So just right below where I create them, I'm going to say C, so that's my circle, dot set fill. I'm going to use color dot, let's make this blue. You will have to import color from JavaFX as well. Make sure, because there's a whole bunch of different color ones, make sure it's from JavaFX Scene Paint, and it's called color. And let's make the rectangle, we'll do a set fill on the rectangle. Let's call that color dot, I don't know, let's use red. So if I run now, we've got a red and a blue rectangle. Now, what I'm going to do with the mouse clicks today is I'm just going to change the color. But like most things in Java, I'm just going to do something simple, but you can really do whatever you want in these sort of mouse click stuff. Think of it the same way as if you press a key, a key on the keyboard. You press one of the arrow buttons, one of the arrow keys. You can run whatever code you want. And so we've seen that in things like the snake game. We've seen that in some of the other JavaFX stuff we've done as well, where we can run we can have a whole bunch of code when we do one of these actions. So for this, it's going to be mouse actions. And the mouse actions that we do, the mouse events that we use, we're just going to be changing the color, essentially, updating some variables and changing the color of these shapes. But you can, in principle, do anything you want. If you coded up a way to play a sound, you could do that. If you had a way to you right click or something and it does something different, maybe it runs some other code and instantiates something, and you can do a whole bunch of stuff here. So it doesn't just have to be changing the color, but where I put the change of the color, that's where you would put whatever code you want. So that's what we're going to do for our interaction. So for the Windows setup, that's basically done. There's nothing else we really need to do here. We've got the rectangle, we got the circle, we changed our color, and we're showing the window. So the next piece here is that mouse interaction. So none of this should be surprising. We've been doing stuff like this for sort of weeks and weeks in JavaFX. So the mouse interaction is the new stuff. So the first one I'm going to mess with is the circle. So we're going to do the circle stuff here, and then a little bit later on, we'll do stuff with the rectangle. So for the circle, I'm going to do C, that's my circle, dot set on, and I'm going to start typing mouse. And you can see there's a whole bunch of functions here for the mouse. clicked, drag entered, drag exited, drag over, entered, exited, moved, tons of stuff you can do with the mouse. So I'm going to show you a few of these today. So the first one I'm going to mess with is set on mouse entered. So when the mouse enters the circle on my screen, I can do something. I'm going to use a anonymous function here. So I'm going to say, let's create a new event handler. And notice in here, it should be a mouse event. That's exactly what we're going to use, a mouse event. So we've used action event for like buttons. We use key events for keyboard presses. For mouse interaction, it's a mouse event. So my standard sort of outline for the event handler anonymous function looks like this. I need to make sure to import event handler from JavaFX and mouse event also from JavaFX. And then I'm going to put my cursor between the two curly brackets and press enter so I have the space now to put whatever code I want. And then I hover over the event handler and say add unimplemented methods, which gives us handle. So now any code that I write in here, in handle, gets run when the mouse enters the circle. So let's do something real simple. Let's say circle.set fill. Let's do color.green. So when my mouse enters the circle, it will change from the blue that it starts at to green. So if I run it, it's blue right now. My mouse goes over it, it changes to green. Now when my mouse leaves the circle, nothing happens. So I basically just have a way to permanently change the color of the circle to green when my mouse moves over it, but then that's it. And actually this event is actually firing every single time I move my mouse over. So as soon as I do this, it changes the color to green, but it was already green, so it didn't look like it changed anything. And that's it. That's how you can do a mouse enter. Now, if I want to change back to blue when my mouse leaves, it's a separate function. So I can make it, I can use c.set on mouse exited. So when the mouse exits the circle, what do I want it to do? Let's use a lambda for this one. I'm going to write the minimal lambda, so very little syntax lambda, and then I'll write one that has a little bit more syntax. So you can use e, lambda, the lambda arrow, c.set fill color dot blue. And we don't even need the semicolon there right after the set fill. So this is the minimum that you would need for this lambda to work. So I move my mouse over, turns green. I have my mouse leave the circle, turns back to blue. So you could use this, for example, to highlight something. This is a very simple sort of highlight. If your mouse is over it, it sort of notifies you that the program knows your mouse is over it. Now, as far as the lambda goes, there's a couple things that we can change here. So let me go back to empty here. If you want to write a lambda that has a bit more syntax, you would put the parentheses and then your input. And I'm going to draw a little bit on this to show you exactly what this corresponds to. And then you put your lambda arrow and a set of brackets like this. And then in here, you'll put whatever code you want, c.setFill. And then we need color.blue. You do need that semicolon that I deleted before. You do need it here when you use the brackets. So this is a little bit more syntax, might make a little bit more sense than the one that it doesn't include as much syntax. So here, this E directly corresponds to the event. And the stuff in the brackets here directly corresponds to what you put in handle. So that's how these things are laid. And I've talked about this before when we first talked about the lambdas and stuff. But in case you've sort of been using them, or maybe you've just been using the anonymous functions, it gives you the exact same features. It's just you don't have to write nearly as much code if you don't want to. So that's it for the mouse entered and exited. If you want to highlight something, or you just want the user to know, give some feedback to the user that their mouse is over a particular object, this is a very easy way to do it. And it's not just about running this particular code. For highlighting, yes, this is something that's useful. But if you want to make sure that something else happens in here as well, if I move my mouse over something, maybe I want to change what the graphic looks like. Maybe I want to, like I said, like do some sort of highlighting. Maybe I want to print something to the screen. Maybe I want to change my UI in some way. This is where you can do it. You can put whatever code you want to in here. And that'll be the same for the rectangle stuff that we do here in a moment. So is there any questions on the mouse stuff so far? So let's mess around with the rectangle. I want to do a click. There's two different types. I should say there's a couple different types of ways to deal with a mouse click. Similar to the sort of keyboard stuff as well. For keyboard, there's like set on key typed, set on key pressed, set on key released. There's a few like that. Mouse is the same way. There's a few states that the mouse can have. You can click the mouse, which is the full sort of up and down of the button. That's a click, the full up and down. If you press the mouse button, that's just the down. And if you release the mouse button, if you use the release, that's just the up action. So there's a few different ways that you can handle sort of mouse presses. So the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to use a rectangle now. I'm going to say set on mouse. We're going to do clicked. So that's the full action of clicking the mouse, not just the down or not just the up, but the full thing. You have to do down and up on the button. And the reason why I'm sort of harping on this a bit is because it actually is important. When you want a certain action to happen, depends on which one you used here. If you use press, then you don't have to release the button in order for the action to happen. In this one with clicked, you do have to release the button. I'm going to use just a lambda here, but I'm going to start with that sort of a basic sort of empty lambda. Let's see. Elijah had a quick question here. Is there a way to click on a shape, and if you click on another spot, then the shape will change to that location? So that's something where you will need some extra code to sort of work on something like that. The extra code, when you do a click, for example, let's say you click on an object, just like this, just like the rectangle. When you do the click, you would save that the rectangle was clicked. You'd probably have some extra variable to say that, oh yeah, this is the rectangle that was clicked. And then when you click again on some other object, so whether that's the pane or whether that's some other like grid location or something, then you would make sure to move the object that had been selected. So it's sort of like a selected type variable that you'd probably keep track of. You would move the object that you had selected, which was clicked first, to the location that you just clicked. So I'll show you how to use some of that location information when we do some of the mouse click stuff here for the rectangle. But doing something like that would take a little bit of extra code. You'd have to know what object you intended to move. So you'd have to have a variable that was related to what the object was that you clicked first, and sort of save it into a variable. All right, so I have this lambda. I'm going to put my my cursor here in between the curly brackets and sort of give myself a little space, because we're going to have a little bit of more code here than we had for the set on mouse exited. And let's check the button first. Check with button, and I'm going to use the right click for this first part. So I'm going to say E. That's my event. Remember, E is the mouse event. So I'm going to say get button. This is exactly the same way that the keys work, that the key presses work, right? We use the key code stuff when we get to keys. In here, it's the mouse button, dot, and then we have a few options: middle, primary, secondary. Those are the three sort of main ones. There are ways to get the other buttons as well, but for the most common are the middle, primary, and secondary. So I'm going to use secondary. That's typically the right mouse click. So if I right click, the way I've set this up, if I've right clicked on the rectangle, that's what this is doing. Let's check what color the rectangle is. So if I right click on the rectangle, if the rectangle got dot or the R dot get fill, so the color of my rectangle, if that's equal to color dot red, which is my sort of initial color here, that's my initial color of the rectangle. If the fill is red, let's change our dot set fill to, let's say, color dot purple. Otherwise, let's set the fill to color dot red. So if the color's red, set it to purple. If the color's not red, set it back to red. So that's what we're doing with the mouse click. So Elijah, in this situation, you would check for a primary click, which we're going to do in just a second. You would check for a primary click, and then you would save whatever sort of selected variable you created. You'd say that, okay, this rectangle, this thing was selected. And then later on, if you clicked somewhere else on the pane, you would make sure to change the selected object to the location where you just clicked the mouse. So you would have to do a little bit of extra code. You'd have to sort of mess around with it a little bit, but it wouldn't be too complicated. It wouldn't be sort of much more than just this style of thing. All right, so this is our right click. So let's take a look in here. I'm going to run this. So we have our red. I'm going to put my mouse over the rectangle, and I'm going to right click, and we got purple. And if I right click again, the color is not red, so I'm going to set it to red. So right clicking will send it back. And I have to do the full click. That's the important part here. If I just click and hold, so I press down on the mouse and I just hold it, just what I'm doing right now, it doesn't change. It's not until I release the button, which I just did, that it changes. So that's what the clicked does. So I'm going to change this from clicked to pressed. And we're actually going to leave it at pressed. We're going to use the pressed version of this for the rest of what we're going to do today. If I run this now, as soon as I right click, as soon as the mouse button goes down, that's when it changes. So it is important whether you use pressed, clicked, or released. That's going to change when some of this stuff happened. Now, clicked and released is basically the same, at least in terms of the stuff we're doing now. But you might want something where if you want to do a drag and then you want to release at that point and you want to do some other code when you do a release, then you probably want a release version. But in any case, pressed is when it goes down. Clicked, you have to do the full action of the full click. So that's something to remember. We're going to use pressed for the rest of the drag stuff that we're going to do today. So right click changes the color. So that's what this code here is doing. Let's do the dragged. Let's make it so we can drag this rectangle around. It's actually pretty easy to do. JavaFX has this stuff sort of more or less built in for to use, but we're going to see a potential issue that we are going to sort of work through on how to fix. So I'm going to do another lambda. And I'm going to say set on mouse, and I'm going to use dragged. And I'm going to write the same lambda that we were using, like this. The same basic sort of blank lambda, and put my cursor between the curly brackets and press enter like this. And then let's just say r.setX, so that's setting the position of the rectangle, the X position, to E. E is my mouse event, dot get scene X. So get scene X is the location in the window. I should just say in the X location in the window where the mouse is located. So this will tell me where's the mouse in the window. It's e.getSceneX. So I'm going to set the rectangle to be at the position where my mouse is located. I need to do this for both the X and the Y. So if I run it and I click, so I'm using left click this time, and I drag, it seems to be working, but you may have noticed a little jump. So I'm going to click really close to the sort of lower right edge of this rectangle here. I'm going to click and I'm going to start moving, and you'll notice that it jumps. The rectangle seems to jump so that my mouse pointer is on the upper left. So I just moved just a tiny little bit, and it looks like the rectangle jumps. Now, that may not matter to you in your program that something like that's happening. And for doing some initial sort of testing on whether the other code you might be running, so maybe you're running other code in here while it's dragging, that may not matter, that it does this little jump. But it's a little bit annoying, and it doesn't look as polished when you have this sort of stuff jumping around like this. So we need to think of a way to fix that. So what's happening is this. When I use, let me get my pen and stuff out here. So when I use set X and set Y, that's defined right here at that upper left corner. So when I move that, so that's going to be, that's right here. So when I say set X and set Y to where the mouse is located, then as soon as I do a drag, which is moving the mouse just a little bit while I'm left clicking, it's going to make the mouse jump to be right here, because that's where X and Y are defined for a rectangle. So no matter where I click on the rectangle, it'll immediately do that jump. It has to, because that's what I have coded here. The problem is I need to do some kind of shift. Let's say, for instance, let me draw the rectangle again. Let's say, for instance, I want to click in the middle of the rectangle. So I want to click right here. Well, our rectangle that we've drawn is 30 by 30. So when I do this set of lines, set X and set Y, if my mouse is right here, I actually need to shift up by 15 and to the left by 15 before I draw the rectangle, because I want to make it look like I'm dragging the rectangle from the middle. So in here, I would need to subtract 15 and subtract 15. So let me show you what happens when I hard code those numbers in. So this, by sort of what I'm saying by the picture here, if I put a minus 15 and a minus 15 in both of these, it should look like I'm dragging the rectangle by the middle. So let's do that. So I'm going to put minus 15 and minus 15. So I'm going to do the click and drag, and now it looks like it's from the middle. Now there is a little bit of lag when I'm dragging, where the rectangle sort of lags behind. That's just a JavaFX thing. There's not really a whole lot that we can do about it. But when I stop the mouse, it now looks like my mouse is in the center, or at least the little pointer there is in the center, as opposed to being in the upper corner. So when you come across sort of an issue like this, where it's like, oh, there's like something weird where it's like popping to a particular position, it's worth drawing a picture out like that, because that picture is helpful in determining, all right, what does it mean when I do the drag? And then does it do what I expect? If I put a minus 15, minus 15, does it look like I'm dragging it from the center? Now, the reason why it's minus for both, so for the center here, is remember that it's negative going up and it's negative to the left. So that's why it's minus for both of them for my 30, 30. Now, what we're going to do is figure out how do we make this work for any position. Obviously, if I put minus 30, it's going to look like it's down. My mouse is down here in the in the lower right corner, and you can figure out sort of any position you want by hard coding it in. But what if I don't want it to be hard coded? What if I want it to depend on wherever I click with the mouse? Then we need a little bit more code. So if it's okay for you in this situation to be in the center, then you just have to take whatever the height and width are, divide by 2, and that's what you would subtract from this. But I want it to be anywhere. I want to make this generic. It could be my mouse would be at any position. Wherever I click, that's the position where it's going to look like I'm dragging from. So we need a little bit more code for that. And specifically, we need a mouse, something with our mouse pressed. So after this if, let's do a left click button. e.getButton equals mouse button dot primary. So that's the left click. When I left click, let's create a couple of variables. Now I'm going to create the variables right here with the rectangle stuff, but we're actually going to remove them because this isn't quite going to work the way that we want. So I'm going to basically save a couple of variables here. So let me create them. I'm going to call this like click X and click Y. And I'm going to save those two variables related to where my mouse just clicked. So I'm going to say click X equals e.getSceneX. And click Y equals e.getSceneY. So all I'm doing is as soon as I click, save the X and Y position of where I clicked. So where did I click on the screen? That's the goal here. But you notice we have an error. So it says the local variable click X defined in an enclosing scope, so defined up here, must be final or effectively final. We probably don't want to make this final. Remember what final does for variables. It makes it a constant. You can change it, basically set it one time. You can set it once, and then that's the way it has to be set. That's not what we want here. Every time I click, I want to record where did I just click. And we can actually print that out as well. So I can do like a print here. Maybe I'll print a %.2f, and then another %.2f, and then a new line. And we'll put click X and click Y like that. So we'll print it out. Every time we click on the rectangle, we're going to show where we clicked. But this error is not going to go away while we have these here. So if you want to use a variable and change it like this, use an equals like this, inside of a lambda or the anonymous function, these variables must be, I'm going to remove them from here and bring them all the way up to class scope. They must be class variables. So the same place that you would put private variables. They must be in class scope. That's one of the restrictions. So it's a JavaFX thing. It's related to how lambdas work. Technically, it's like closure related stuff, because by the time you run the lambda, the local variables up here will have gone out of scope because this function will be completely done running, and so technically they'd be gone, which is why it doesn't let you use them. So there are some sort of more complex issues that are sort of at play as a reason why it won't let you use a regular local variable that you declare up here in one of these functions. So it gets a little bit more complicated as to why, but it will work if you make them class scope variables. This is not quite all we want. We need a little bit more code in each one of these lines to get it to work, but I want to show you that it will record where we click. but it's recording it on the entire scene. So if I click down here, I'm just going to click sort of in the, actually I'm going to click close to this, to the top left corner here. And notice I got 301 and 300. That's where we put the rectangle to begin with. We put it at 300, 300 when we created it. So I'm getting the mouse click location in my window. And that's what I said before. That's what get scene X and get scene Y does. It's where did you click in the window. So Elijah, I know I keep mentioning this, but this is what you would want if you were going to click on something and then move it somewhere else. You'd want to make sure that you got the position in the window to know where to move that object to. You'd want to make sure to just use this. For our situation, I already know that these numbers should be related to the rectangle, not to the absolute position in the window. I'm only doing a minus 15, 15 here. What I want to see when I run this, what I want to see is when I click in the center of the rectangle, or close to the center, I want to see minus 15, minus 15, because I know that will be the center. And when I drag, that will work. So this is not quite right here, but it's close. In fact, I can take my rectangle dot get x and subtract the scene x. What would that do for this first number? It would take 300, because that's where the x is when the rectangle starts out, minus 314, which gives me about minus 15, because I was close to the center of the rectangle. So we'll use r.getY for the next one. Basically, I'm computing a relative position. So in here, I'm going to click really close, as close as I can sort of guess to the center of this rectangle here. And there we go. I've got minus 15 and minus 13. I was a couple pixels off for the Y. Now this click X and click Y are what I expect to use down here. So basically what I've done is I've computed a relative position. Where's my mouse relative to the upper left corner of the rectangle? It's minus 15 pixels, or the mouse. If I was going to move the mouse to the upper left corner, I would move minus 15 pixels and minus 13 pixels. So 15 to the left, 13 up, and I would get, my mouse would be at the upper left corner. That's what I'm computing in this click X and click Y variable. Now, I don't expect you to sort of realize this and come up with this in just a couple minutes, but it's one of those things where, you know, printing out some of the sort of pixel values here could be important. Clicking, you know, printing them out, sort of seeing what values you're getting, and then realizing what values you need to make it work the way you want to, and then figuring out a way to come up with the equation to get there. And yeah, that might take a little bit of time if you're not used to messing around with these sorts of things, but I'm definitely confident that you guys could certainly come up with something that would work for you. So instead of negative 15 down here, I'm just going to add, because my click X and clicks Y are already negative, I'm going to add click X and click Y. The signs on here, if you use minus in this function, you would have to use, essentially you would flip the order of these. You would do e.getSceneX minus r.getX. So you can use different sort of signs than what I'm using here, but this is just the way that I'd sort of originally written it. So now anywhere where I click on that rectangle, it will keep that position. So if I click over here, negative 10, negative 20, and I move it, my mouse is in the same location once this thing moves. And same thing if I click sort of up here, close to this corner, it's in the same spot once I start moving it, and basically anywhere. So I've made it very general for moving this rectangle using my mouse anywhere on the rectangle to do the dragging. It doesn't jump to the center or jump to the corner. It's just always sort of where the mouse actually was originally clicked. So sometimes those little things can take a little bit of time, but I think sort of overall using this way here makes this look a little bit better as well. Yeah, and then Some of the other functions, we're not going to do any other functions today. This is all the coding that I was sort of planning on doing. Some of the other functions, like if you're dragging something and then you release, you would have your r.setOnMouse. It should be set on mouse drag. I guess just mouse drag release. Set on mouse. So set on mouse drag released. That's one as well. So if you're dragging and then you release, do you want it to do something? And that's where you would put that. You've got drag entered and drag exited. So if you drag over something, you can run specific code. There's a lot of sort of nice mouse stuff in here for you to use, and you just run whatever code you want to run. Here we were doing the set X and set Y. Up here we were doing color stuff. If you need to, you know, in some of the other JavaFX stuff we've been messing with, we've been running like move and draw for the stuff on Snake. We've run sort of other stuff in some of the other lecture stuff that we've done. Run other code. So any code you want to run to do sort of anything. In the near future, for the Snake game, when we start spawning apples, we'll probably do some random number generator and just have a low probability that at any given frame we spawn an apple. That'll be a very simple way to do it. And so in that case, it's literally in a lambda somewhere, we're going to be having a timer that there a random number that's generated, and then we spawn an apple, and when that apple spawns, it gets put into an array list. So there'll be a lot of code that actually runs when we spawn an apple inside of one of these lambdas. So you can do whatever you want to in here, whatever you need to do for your program. So my hope is that this was at least somewhat helpful for some of the final project stuff that you'll be working on. Usually I try to do some mouse stuff, try to do some image stuff just to get folks sort of started. So we will do some image stuff in the near future, but we do need to do the test/quiz stuff before then. So next Friday, we're going to do some review for the quiz, and we'll do it, you know, at some point, probably the following Friday after that. We don't have too many of these sort of weekends left. And then, yeah, like we don't have any other homeworks other than what's due, was it tonight? And then, yeah, there's no other homeworks, no other graded labs, nothing like that. Just working on final project stuff is sort of your main goal after we have the homework and the last quiz. All right, so that's basically it. I didn't have anything else that I wanted to do today. So I will see you guys at lab next week. No in-person stuff. And then I guess I will see folks in person the week after that. So have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you very much.
Professor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Professor.